Hello everyone, welcome back to the Channel. The situation on the Eastern Front has entered a dangerous new phase as Ukrainian lines begin to crack under heavy Russian pressure, and reports spread of soldiers abandoning their positions in several critical sectors of the battlefield. Tension rises hour by hour as Russian forces push deeper toward key strongholds, while Ukrainian commanders struggle to hold defensive lines that have been weakened by months of non-stop fighting, exhaustion, shortages, and relentless bombardment. The pressure on the Ukrainian military has never been greater as the Russian army increases its assaults across multiple directions, forcing Ukraine to spread its remaining forces thin across a front line that stretches hundreds of miles. Ukrainian officials are facing one of the most difficult moments of the entire war, with new reports indicating that some units are withdrawing without orders, while others are too overwhelmed to continue holding their positions. Under the weight of Russian attacks, this development is sending shockwaves through Kyiv, as military analysts warn that even small breakdowns in discipline and structure can quickly escalate into major collapses on the battlefield, especially when the enemy is advancing aggressively and methodically. Russian forces appear to be taking advantage of every Ukrainian weakness, launching coordinated assaults with artillery, tanks, drones, and infantry as they move forward across areas where Ukrainian defenses have started to thin out or crumble entirely. The growing problem of desertion within Ukrainian ranks is becoming increasingly visible as more soldiers express frustration with shortages in ammunition, medical supplies, proper rotation, and mental support after months of non-stop fighting along some of the most brutal battlefields in the region. Many Ukrainian soldiers have been serving without rest for extremely long periods, with some units reporting that they have been fighting without proper reinforcement since early last year, creating a level of fatigue that is now becoming impossible to hide or ignore. Their collapse of morale is perhaps the most alarming factor in the current situation, because morale is the foundation of any army, and once it begins to fall, the consequences can be severe and immediate for both frontline troops and the overall strategic position. Military experts explain that when soldiers reach a breaking point through exhaustion, isolation, and pressure, it becomes incredibly hard for commanders to maintain control, especially when the enemy advances in waves and the defenders struggle to keep up. Russian forces have been steadily improving their operational tactics, using drones to locate Ukrainian defensive positions before launching concentrated artillery strikes that tear through trenches, bunkers, and fortified lines that once held stronger resistance. This tactic has caused heavy casualties for Ukraine while allowing Russia to push forward with fewer losses, creating a widening imbalance that further stresses already strained Ukrainian formations across the front. As Russian units continue closing in on strategic towns near key supply routes, Ukrainian commanders face the urgent challenge of stabilizing positions that are no longer sustainable due to manpower shortages, heavy casualties, and lack of equipment. The threat of encirclement is now growing in several sectors where Russian troops are advancing from multiple directions, hoping to trap Ukrainian units inside shrinking pockets before Ukrainian reinforcements can arrive to break the encirclement. This development has created renewed debate among Ukrainian leadership over whether to consolidate forces and withdraw to more defensible lines or attempt to counterattack. Despite lacking the necessary strength for sustained operations, the decision becomes even more difficult because political leaders in Kyiv understand that strategic withdrawals carry immense psychological impact for both the military and the population, as each retreat becomes a symbol of weakening resistance and territorial loss. Meanwhile, Russian propaganda channels are using the reports of Ukrainian desertions to portray the Ukrainian military as fractured and collapsing, attempting to create further psychological pressure on frontline soldiers and the Ukrainian public. The Kremlin sees an opportunity to accelerate Ukrainian losses and is focusing on fast-moving operations backed by constant drone surveillance and precision artillery fire designed to break remaining Ukrainian defensive cohesion on the ground. Ukrainian troops describe the battlefield as chaotic and increasingly unpredictable, with Russian drones constantly overhead and artillery fire falling across multiple points at once, leaving little room for safe movement or regrouping. Many soldiers report feeling isolated due to communication failures and limited access to reinforcements, making it harder to maintain discipline and structure in moments where quick decision-making is crucial for survival. Although Ukrainian units continue to fight bravely in many sectors, the growing stress across the front line is leading to an uneven distribution of strength, where some units remain effective while others collapse under the pressure, allowing Russian troops to exploit multiple weak points. This uneven resistance makes it harder for Ukrainian commanders to coordinate a unified defense, leading to further complications as Russian troops gain momentum in regions where defenses have thinned dramatically. Ukrainian officials are now pushing for emergency measures to restore discipline and stabilize defensive positions by rotating exhausted troops and reinforcing frontline units with whatever manpower and equipment can be allocated. Despite shortages throughout the country, international analysts warn that if desertion continues to spread even at a slow rate, it could trigger a chain reaction where morale collapses faster than reinforcements can respond, creating sudden and unpredictable shifts in battlefield control. The Ukrainian government is also under increasing pressure from allies who demand clearer plans for stabilizing the front. as concerns grow that the situation could escalate into a major strategic defeat if the lines continue to weaken. At the same time, Ukrainian soldiers emphasized that they are not abandoning the fight, but are overwhelmed after months of continuous frontline exposure without the rotations and rest that are essential for maintaining combat capability. Russia, on the other hand, is taking full advantage of its numerical and logistical superiority, using large-scale assaults supported by drone swarms, artillery, tanks, and infantry, pushing Ukrainian units to their absolute limits in several areas simultaneously. The situation is further complicated by long-range missile strikes on Ukrainian supply routes that slow the delivery of ammunition, fuel, medical supplies, and reinforcements, making it harder to sustain defensive positions even when troops are willing to continue fighting. As the conflict intensifies, pressure builds in Kyiv, where political leaders are working around the clock to maintain internal stability, reassure international partners, and find ways to restore confidence within the military and among the civilian population. Military strategists stress that Ukraine must find a way to stabilize the front line, even if it requires difficult decisions involving tactical withdrawal or large-scale redeployment to prevent further encirclement and collapse of critical sectors. Russian advances near key towns and industrial zones have forced Ukrainian commanders to make fast decisions with limited information while facing simultaneous threats from multiple directions, creating an environment where even small delays lead to significant losses. Many Ukrainian soldiers admit they feel abandoned on certain sectors, where reinforcements are unable to reach them due to heavy shelling and Russian drone surveillance, making desertion a desperate decision rather than intentional betrayal. The rapid evolution of drone warfare has given Russia a major advantage because drone swarms are now used not only for reconnaissance but also for direct strikes on trenches, vehicles, and command posts, making defensive positions increasingly vulnerable. This new level of drone threat has created constant psychological pressure for Ukrainian soldiers who must remain hidden for long periods with little opportunity to move freely or counterattack without being detected and targeted. Despite all these challenges, Ukraine continues to demonstrate resilience, with many units refusing to give ground and managing to hold defensive lines despite overwhelming pressure and limited supplies, proving that the fight is far from over. However, resilience alone is not enough to counter a well-resourced enemy that continues to adapt its tactics and expand its operations across multiple fronts, creating sustained pressure that drains Ukrainian manpower and equipment. Analysts warn that Ukraine risks entering a phase where battlefield collapse becomes possible if reinforcements, supplies, and morale do not improve rapidly enough to prevent the spread of desertion and disorganization among exhausted units. The situation is especially concerning in regions where Ukrainian lines have already started to bend under pressure, allowing Russian forces to push deeper toward strategic crossroads that Ukraine cannot afford to lose without significant consequences. Ukrainian civilians living near the front lines describe a growing sense of fear as the sound of artillery becomes more frequent and the presence of drones grows more constant, creating an atmosphere of tension and uncertainty across entire communities. As Russian forces continue to advance, Ukraine's ability to stabilize the situation will depend on swift and coordinated action by military leadership, the government, and international partners who continue to supply weapons and financial aid despite increasing challenges.